In 1983, Nicholas Wolterstorff received a tragic phone call on a Sunday afternoon, a call that was to change his life. His son Eric, aged just 25 years old, had fallen in a mountain climbing accident and had been killed. Wolterstorff says that as he stood frozen, the icy burning pain of reality set in. His son, his beloved son, was gone. Over the following days, weeks and months, Wolterstorff moved through a whirlwind of emotions, and eventually, 4 years later, he published the journal of the writing that he'd done through that agonising time, sharing with the world what it was like for him to lose his child. He named his short but profound book, Lament for a Son. At the time, Wolterstorff was the Distinguished Professor of Philosophical Theology at Yale University, and the resulting book is an extraordinarily thoughtful, articulate and vivid account of the heartache and grief he endured and to this day still endures. He grieves in print, he wrestles publicly with his pain, and he mocks the vanity of trying to think of or find solutions. He writes, "Please don't say it's not really so bad, because it is. If you think your task as a comforter is to tell me that really, all things considered, it's just not so bad, you do not sit with me in my grief, but place yourself off in the distance away from me. Over there you are of no help. What I need to hear from you is that you recognise how painful it is. I need to hear from you that you're with me in my desperation. Come, sit beside me on my mourning bench." In last week's Chalke Talk, I told the story of how as a young boy I used to attend Sunday school at my local church, and how on one particular Sunday afternoon the teacher decided that he wanted to demonstrate why it was that in the famous but mysterious Old Testament story in the book of Exodus chapter 33, even though Moses was allowed to see God pass by, glimpsing something of his glory, he was told that he could not look at God's face and live. I explained that, taking a piece of tissue paper, our teacher moved it slowly closer to the naked flame of a candle he just lit, but that even before the tissue paper touched the flame, it burst into a ball of fire. His explanation: God's like that. God is holy. God is righteous. God is a judge. He's an all-consuming fire, and we're sinful, which means that no one can see his anger, his righteousness, without suffering the same fate as this piece of paper did when it got too close to the candle's flame. I explained that although this vivid illustration stuck in my mind and for years provided me with the basis of my understanding, not just of this story, but what it meant for God to be holy, the older I get, the more convinced I am that it's really not what the story is about at all. As a result of saying all of this, over the last week I've received lots of feedback. One writer told me, God is a righteous consuming fire, not your mamby-pamby God of soft love. Well, it was on a trip to Thailand some years ago that I visited a home for unwanted children. Crammed into a stinking, disused hospital with only 500 beds were 1,600 2 to 10-year-olds. Not only were they physically disabled, they were emotionally starved of love. To see their suffering was totally overwhelming. It was just too much to bear. I remember leaving the hospital, sitting in a car outside and praying, "Lord, please, please let me die. I can't live anymore with the pain of what I've just seen." I felt as though I couldn't go on with the knowledge that such suffering existed in the world. And so I ask again, rather than Moses' sinfulness preventing him from being able to look on the face of God, could it be that God, who loves more than any other being in the universe, also suffers the most? Nicholas Wolterstorff says that it was only as he struggled with the terrible suffering caused by the loss of his dear son that reflecting on the story of Exodus 33, he began to understand the idea that no one could see God's face and live differently. To love is to suffer, and because God is love, he suffers great suffering. So much so that perhaps God's sorrow is his splendour. In Exodus 33, Wolterstorff suggests God hides his face from Moses because of the immeasurable suffering caused by his love. No one could possibly bear to see a face wrung with such infinite pain and survive. Could it be that the pain of all the suffering that's ever taken place has been etched into God's face? Could it be that God's holiness or differentness, as we discovered the word means last week, is chiefly his love, the very quality by which the New Testament defines him, and the pain which is the inevitable consequence of that love? What do you think? God bless you. I'll see you next week.